Okay, so welcome to this session. And as you probably know, we're really into the thick of it now as we approach our final few months before we get to the AP test. And we are having to move ahead with content, but we are also really working on the skills to build essays. So, and I apologize that your lessons for this week didn't all go up at once. I spent the weekend doing an enormous amount of grading, so I graded your claims, as you noticed, and you're taking those claims to the next level right now. So I either put a grade in its learning, or I gave you a note about what you need to do to fix it. Some people didn't do it at all, and there was a lot of people who just copied each other, and there was a really common wrong answer going around that a lot of people used, which didn't work. And anyway, so there's where we are with the content and the skills. So what you're going to do this week is you're going to build that out into 2 paragraphs. If your claims are good and your evidence supports it, you're going to build that out as 2 paragraphs. And there is the body of the essay called the LEQ. So I have videos to, if there's any step in this that you're unfamiliar with. And by the way, my website, History Haven, which I used to use a lot more before we were forced to use its learning. History Haven, if you go there, you see all the videos there. You see LEQ1, LEQ2, which you watch to do this assignment. And I also put the older the older essay, the older video that's called The Paragraph. Because we got a lot of students who started this semester from Denmark and other schools, and I'm not sure where you were or in the essay writing process when you left those other schools and came in. So you might need to go back and look at that look at that video called The Paragraph. I may have linked it in your lesson. So you're going to write those paragraphs out. And the week is in content is the Industrial Revolution. I have several textbooks on PDF. Someone asked last time, could I post more of those? And I actually found one that the reading on the Industrial Revolution is just perfect because it goes right along with what you have to learn in the CED or in the topics that they give teachers to teach. So I posted that one. I think it's just called Chapter 30, Industrial Revolution. But the pages there go right along with the topic, so that's really good for you to do. And at the end of the week, or when you've done all that, you're going to do one more of these, I call these quick writes, where you write a claim and bullet the evidence you would use to support it, write another claim, bullet the evidence. You're going to do one more of those, but it's on the topic we're studying now. Obviously, the one I graded was on land-based empires that you guys studied last time. And so now we're on the Industrial Revolution. So look at the readings this week carefully. The information is in there. And what I would do if this were a face-to-face class is after you did the readings, I call these quick writes because in face-to-face settings, I time them. You should know the content well enough to where you get this, and in 10 minutes you could fill that out. Think of a claim, bullet a few pieces of evidence, come up with another claim, bullet a few pieces of evidence, because that's the structure of your essay. On the AP test, you have 40 minutes to do the whole thing. And by the way, once you get this quick write, once you get these claims and the evidence there, building out the essay really isn't that much more difficult because you have your paragraphs, and I hope you've watched the videos enough to know that you also have your thesis statement. Your thesis is a repeat of the topic sentences, which are claims that answer the prompt. You put those claims in the first paragraph, that's your thesis. So in reviewing this with my face-to-face students yesterday, I sent a lot of them back to the video because I asked them, when you make a claim that's your topic sentence, how do you check to see if it's really valid? And only a few people knew. In the video, I said, you take the prompt, evaluate the extent to which the expansion of land-based empires changed social structures. You turn that into a question. How did the expansion of land-based empires change social structures? Now, your claim should answer that question with specific content. If it does, it's a good claim and topic sentence, and they will combine to form a thesis. So there's kind of in a nutshell again, what you're doing with that. And I want to make sure you get this down because we're moving to the DBQ next, and it's the same thing. You have claims and use evidence, except on the document-based question, the evidence doesn't come from your head. They give you primary sources to read, and you pull it from the primary sources. So it's the question that gives you the answers. And 2 weeks ago, we did the session on what does the AP test actually look like? How's it structured? And that is, I mentioned it there, so you have access to that video as well. All right. The readings that I selected will cover most of what you need to know for the Industrial Revolution. There are a few other things, and I'm going to go over some content right now and take questions from you all that you have about the content or anything that's going on in class right now. I know I'm home today. I'm not feeling really well, so I'm not at school, obviously. When I logged onto It's Learning yesterday, I had 40 emails, and a lot of the questions were about the claims, and a lot of them were people who didn't do them, who submitted them late. But a big problem with the claims was this. The wording of the prompt was very specific about land-based empires. So if you wrote about the Spanish Empire in the New World with Creoles and Peninsulares, that's really good content. But I specifically said in the video that you can't use that example because it's outside the content of the prompt, which is land-based empires. And at the reading, when we grade your AP test, there's absolutely no mercy here. If you write a wonderful essay about maritime empires, but you don't write anything about land-based empires, if that's the prompt, you get a 0. So I'm not doing you any favors by passing that along. I want you to be very certain that you look at the prompt. The video has that Venn diagram that comes together where all the terms of the prompt converge, and that's what you have to write about. I do have more videos coming, and I'm going to give you what a model essay actually would look like on this prompt and show you how to resolve the points that you need to earn. So that's the video that's coming up. All right. Before we get into the content, does anybody have any questions about this assignment, this writing assignment? Uh-huh.
So once you get into writing, so you have your claim and then your pieces of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying you write your thesis after that, but when you're writing out your essay, like it goes first?
You're absolutely correct.
So when you're like combining your claim and your evidence, that you're kind of combining that to make your thesis statement?
Well, your claim is already part of your thesis. Really what you do, you look at the prompt and then you start to think. I call this the brainstorming. You think everything you know about that topic and you start writing down words. You may not even use all those words, but you just start writing things down. And then you'll begin to see how, in this case, how social structures change. You think, well, we have the rise of the Ottoman Empire, Janissaries. You have the rise of the Janissaries that help them expand. Excuse me. And so then you start to see, well, there's military elites, and so I can make a claim about that. So you kind of build upwards. And the point of what I said in the video is your thesis is, when you're planning, the thesis is what you come up with last, although it's first in the order that you write. So that's what I meant by that. So yes, you are correct.
Okay.
All right, any other questions about this process? All right. So I'm going to show the screen here. And you should, I hope, see 5.5. Can somebody let me know if you see technology of the industrial age?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And also, the questions that we've got in previous sessions, I think some of you are afraid that you're not getting the content. That question has come up. What you have right here, this is the content, all right? In the video on how to study for the AP World History test, everything that the that you'll get questions about will come from this. And I'll tell you, the multiple choice questions on the AP test are made from the historical developments. If I can highlight that. The multiple choice questions come from the historical developments, and the essays are made from the learning objectives. So the essay that you are putting together, the LEQ, is from topic 4.7, about changes in social hierarchies, and the last historical development is about how empires change them. So that's how these are put together. So basically, you kind of have like the answer key to the test here if you know this. And this is why I'm having you annotate one of them. One that the readings didn't quite cover one, so you're annotating one of them. So this is what we've done with nationalism. We get into the beginning of the Industrial Revolution right here, and there are things that led to it, and John Green video and other things cover this. And AP Worldopedia, by the way, covers all that. And then we get to how it spreads. So you need to know it starts in Britain. It spreads to Europe, eventually to the United States. The U.S. has that Civil War thing going on, so they were a little slow to do a full-on industrialization. And of course, the southern states wanted to remain agriculture until the Civil War. But there is a connection here. The southern states kept slavery so long because they were producing all the cotton for the British Industrial Revolution. But you'll also notice here that other places industrialize as well. Russia and Japan, all right? Russia and Japan are interesting cases because they industrialize in a completely different way than the U.S. and Britain did. The governments managed the industrial process there. The governments took over. And I think it's one of the readings that's posted. It talks about Japan and the Meiji Restoration, and in the Russia. I tell you what, I have notes for Russia and Japan just to make sure you get that. I'll post them up. They're all on History Haven right now, but it's maybe difficult for you to find. But in the 19th century, Russia and Japan take a different route to industrialization. You need to know some of the basic technologies. Steam engines is really big. Steam engines will give Britain the edge. It powers the machinery, and steam engines are run by fossil fuel. This is coal. Another reason that the Industrial Revolution took place or began in Britain was their massive coal deposits. All right. Now, by the way, anything that's mentioned in historical development, any fact that's ever mentioned here, is absolutely concrete knowledge you have to know. Your AMSCO book actually has some things that aren't in here. But if you come back to this is like, coming back to the scriptures of this class, so to speak. You see what you have here. So you need to know about steam engines, the edge that they gave, that they don't work unless you have coal. And so, this is the problem for Japan. Japan has no fossil fuels. So they have to figure out how to get around that. And then you need to know about this thing called the Second Industrial Revolution that you see right here. The Second Industrial Revolution. And I'll tell you what that is. The outbreak of industrialization happens in Britain, and it's coal, steam engine driven. It's railroads. It's factories taking raw materials and turning them into products. The Second Industrial Revolution happens later in the 19th century. It's a resurge of industrialization, but it's focused on high-tech things. There's a move away from iron, which becomes kind of the old-fashioned way. Now they're working with steel. They're applying science to the industrial process, and they're learning about chemicals. You have electricity in motors, and this will really spill into the 20th century, of course. And also, instead of coal, they're going to begin to burn oil and fossil fuels with the internal combustion engine. So the Second Industrial Revolution, and by the way, next week we're going to see that this leads to an incredible need in the world for rubber. Rubber comes from trees, and we'll see that this will lead to an enormous colonization of Africa as Belgium goes down there and forces Africans to harvest rubber from the forest. And it's absolutely brutal because the things of the Second Industrial Revolution, this high tech, you need insulation for wires, telegraphs with rubber coating, You need gaskets for machines, belts, all that uses rubber. So you just know what the second industrial revolution is. And then railroads and steamships, all these things. I think you kind of know that already. And the telegraph is going to allow people to colonize better. Britain can colonize India and give them commands almost in real time, because they'll put a telegraph from London across the Mediterranean into Cairo and then run telegraphs over to India. And it used to be that you had to take a boat all the way around Africa. So it took weeks to know what was going on. And by the time you responded to something, it was too late. But the telegraph, they're controlling their colonies in real time here. They also will cut the Suez Canal that will prevent you from having to go through around Africa. When you get over here to government's role, you have different ideas about how government should be involved in the Industrial Revolution. In your reading that you're going to do, you're going to read about capitalism and laissez-faire economics, which is the British and American idea that government should just stay out of business. Let the market, let industry run in and of itself with very little regulations. But you have some areas where the government has to step up, because there's this realization that industrialization made Britain absolutely and enormously powerful. And other nations are going to see that, and their governments are going to get their act together, and they're going to take over and control industrialization. Whereas in Britain, in the United States, it just kind of rose up from the bottom, from the middle class who invested in factories. In some areas, the government's going to come down, and they're going to sponsor it. And you see the examples over here. Egypt in the cotton industry. Britain needs massive amounts of cotton. And when the U.S. Civil War takes place, that is disrupted. So Britain looks elsewhere. And there's a need for industrial cotton. And so Muhammad Ali, the leader of Egypt, works with Britain to convert this is the government coming in, getting loans from Britain to build irrigation so they can grow cotton, and they become the producer of cotton for Britain's industrialization during the U.S. Civil War. And Egypt today is a huge exporter of cotton today because of that. So this is an example of the state-sponsored version of industrialization. Another one is Japan in the Meiji region, which we'll probably talk about next week. I have a podcast on this that I'll assign next week. This is another completely government-run version of industrialization. You have links to all these, of course, I sent out to you. Industrial capitalism. Okay, this part right here you will see in the reading. The middle class increases its wealth, standards of living. There are new social classes in the industrial society. You never had factory workers before. This massive group of factory workers. You had serfs and aristocrats, but you never had factory workers. And their lives are really, really miserable. The middle class, though, benefits from these cheap manufactured things. And so their level of wealth goes up. And then this is what you're reading about today, and I think this is what you are annotating this one, 5.8, and you will get all of this from that reading called Chapter 30 on the Industrial Revolution. And then society as well, how society changes. So, and of course you have AMSCO to fall back on. Families change during the Industrial Revolution. Let me speak to this just for a moment here. About how things change in the Industrial Revolution. So what happens is the second Industrial Revolution produces more scientific stuff. They come out with better medical things. And so what happens is people start to live longer. All right? Also, what's very interesting that happens with industrialization, massive amounts of people leave farming. They move into cities. And they work in factories. So the number of people devoted to farming decreases. So urbanization, you have massive cities that grow and they become really filthy things at first. So what happens? In the agricultural setting, and this is an interesting demographic shift, in agriculture, having a lot of kids is a benefit because you need help around the farm. Even little kids can go milk the cows and collect the eggs. So they actually add to the family's economy. Everyone does. You know, the young girls are helping the mothers. You know, these are usually patriarchal societies. When people move to industrial societies, it changes. I mean, we live in a society created by an industrial revolution. So think about this. You are an incredible expense to your parents. In almost every case, you don't really contribute to your family's economy. I have 3 kids. You know, they get to the point where both my sons have cars when they were in high school. Then there's insurance, and then, you know, I feed them, and they're not really helping with a mortgage here. So, and they're in college now, so it's different. But what happens is suddenly children aren't adding to the family economic production like you do in farming. They're an expense until they turn 18 or 20 and are finally independent, but then they move out. So what happens is industrial families get very, very small. You could have 10 kids on a farm. The more the merrier. It's more help. In industrial society, they're straining the family's economy. So people choose to have fewer kids. So 2 kids. In some countries today, like Germany, the average child is 1. And the government's actually paying people to have kids because the Germans aren't producing, you know, it's expensive to have kids. So the size of families decreases. The fertility rate goes down. And fertility rate means the number of times a woman conceives and has a child. So women are having fewer and fewer children. But the ironic thing is this. The population increases dramatically. People are having fewer children, families are smaller, but there's an explosion of population. And the reason for the explosion of population is better science and more babies are surviving infancy. The infant mortality rate is going to go down because people are learning about sanitation. They're using commercial soap. They're washing their hands. And also medical things. They're learning more things about birth. So in agricultural societies, it wasn't uncommon for a woman to have 12 pregnancies in her life, and maybe 6 of them might survive. Women are having fewer pregnancies, but more children are growing up into adulthood. So that's why you have this kind of paradox. Smaller families, but huge population increase. And the line of population growth through the Industrial Revolution, when it hits, it almost does this. All right, it's just this incredible uptick, which we're still in today. So that's a demographic change. That the concept of a family in farming communities meant an extended family. That meant everyone you'd see at a family reunion, cousins, grandmas, aunts, uncles, because they usually all lived together and cooperated together daily on the farm. So 300 years ago, if you asked someone about their family, they would mean all that group. That's what they would hear. That's my family. Well, in industrial societies, a single set of parents become economically independent with their children, and they usually live by themselves. So it's probably the situation most of us are in today. The name for that is called the nuclear family, because it's the nucleus, just the one mom, one dad living together with their kids. That's the nucleus of an extended family. So families become smaller. Each set of parents and their children become economically independent from all the other extended family members that used to work together. So you have these changes in society. The role of women change. Women and children in lower class families, in industrial laboring families, have it very bad because they're working in factories and the work is really tough. Middle class women, all right, and middle class, I mean, these are people who own little shops or even bankers or lawyers or people who invest some of their money in factories. Their lives improve incredibly because fast produced industrial items go down in price. Now their houses are filled with all these little wonderful things that they can afford. And the women take on a different role, which you may have read about. women in middle-class families are viewed as very important in managing the family income. They're the moral examples. The husbands are out working, providing the money, and the woman does not work. Her work, in this time, her work was the home, managing the kids. The name for that is the cult of domesticity, the idea that a woman's place is in the domestic home. And this is what separates wealthy middle class from the common laborers. So think about this. If you were a man, a middle class man, doing pretty well, you had a nice house, you would like other people to know that your wife does not work. Why? Because it's a symbol, it's a sign that you have arrived, that you are making enough money that my wife does not have to work. She can stay home and manage the household affairs. So it's a sign that we're doing well. We're doing so well, my wife doesn't have to work. So that became like this badge of having made it economically and financially. So all these changes, you'll read more about these, but these are the changes that took place in society during the Industrial Revolution. The components of how Japan and even the Ottomans are going to try this, how they attempted Industrial Revolution, we will talk about a little bit more next week, because all industrial nations have to colonize other places in the world. England can't get enough cotton from England, and there are not enough people in England to buy all the things they make. You got to take over new places and conquer them. And as we'll see, Africa, India, and China in this time period will collapse to the European industrial powers. That's for next week. All right.